Simone's hands trembled as she pushed open her front door, grocery bags cutting into her palms. It had been a long day at the community center where she volunteered, and all she wanted was a quiet evening. But the moment she stepped inside, she knew something was wrong. A woman sat on her cream-colored sofa. Not just any woman, Bethany Richardson, her husband's administrative assistant. The same woman Simone had seen at company parties, always laughing too loud at Trevor's jokes, always touching his arm just a little too long. "Hello, Simone," Bethany said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. She crossed her legs, making herself comfortable. On the coffee table sat a manila folder, official-looking papers peeking out. Simone set down her groceries slowly, her mind racing. "Bethany, what are you doing in my house?" "Trevor gave me his key." Bethany smiled, holding up a key ring Simone recognized, the spare set from the kitchen drawer. "We need to talk. Woman to woman." The audacity of it struck Simone like a physical blow. This woman had let herself into her home, sat on her furniture, and was now looking at her with something between pity and triumph. "Trevor couldn't be here himself," Bethany continued, pushing the folder across the table. "He's a coward that way. But someone needed to handle this, and well, I'm the one who actually cares about him." Simone walked closer, each step measured. She could see the papers now, divorce documents. Her name was already typed on multiple pages, with yellow sticky arrows pointing to signature lines. "He wants a divorce," Bethany said, as if Simone couldn't figure that out herself. "He's been unhappy for years. Surely you've noticed?" Actually, Simone had noticed. She'd noticed the late nights at the office that smelled like perfume. She'd noticed the secret phone calls and the deleted text messages. She'd noticed the way Trevor had started criticizing everything about her. Her clothes, her hair, her volunteer work, her friends. "He's moving on," Bethany continued, leaning forward. Her eyes gleamed with satisfaction. "We're moving on. Together. He wants to do this quickly and quietly. No drama, no fighting. Just sign the papers and we can all move forward with our lives." Simone stared at the documents. She could see Trevor's signature already there, bold and black. He'd signed away their 12-year marriage without even having the courage to face her. "I expected you to cry," Bethany said, studying Simone's face. "Or yell. Or beg. That's what women usually do, isn't it? When they're losing everything?" Something inside Simone shifted. For 6 months she'd been preparing for this moment. 6 long months of secrets and planning and gathering evidence. 6 months of pretending she didn't know what was really happening. And now this woman sat in her home, in her space, expecting her to fall apart. Instead, Simone smiled. It wasn't a sad smile or a bitter smile. It was calm, almost peaceful. She walked to the kitchen, retrieved a pen, and came back to the coffee table. Bethany watched her, confusion creeping across her face. "You know what, Bethany?" Simone said, picking up the pen. "You're absolutely right. No point in dragging this out." She began signing, her signature flowing smoothly across each page. She dated each one, initialed where required, and stacked them neatly. The whole process took less than 5 minutes. Bethany's confusion turned to suspicion. "That's it? You're not going to fight?" "Fight for what?" Simone asked, handing back the folder. "A man who sends his mistress to deliver divorce papers? A man who's too much of a coward to face his own wife? Why would I want to keep that?" She stood, looking down at Bethany. "You can see yourself out. Use that key one more time to lock up, and then I'd appreciate it if you'd leave it on the porch. I'll be changing the locks tomorrow." "Wait," Bethany said, standing quickly. "That's it? You're just giving up?" "Giving up?" Simone's smile widened. "Oh honey, I'm not giving up. I'm letting go. There's a difference." She picked up her grocery bags and headed toward the kitchen. "Thank you for delivering these. You've actually done me a huge favor. I hope you and Trevor are very happy together. You deserve each other." The last thing Simone saw before she disappeared into the kitchen was Bethany's face, twisted in confusion and frustration. The mistress had wanted tears, wanted begging, wanted to see Simone broken. Instead, she'd gotten a calm acceptance that clearly rattled her. Simone heard the front door close, heard the key click in the lock, heard footsteps on the porch. She stood at her kitchen window, watching Bethany walk to her car, still looking confused. Only then did Simone allow herself to breathe. Her hands shook as she gripped the counter. But her smile never faded. Because Bethany had no idea what was coming. Neither did Trevor. They thought they'd won. They thought they'd gotten away with everything. They had no idea that Simone had been 10 steps ahead of them for months. They had no idea about the evidence she'd gathered, the investigators she'd hired, the federal agents who were already building a case. They thought they were so clever, so careful. They had no idea that every forged signature, every stolen dollar, every illegal transfer had been documented. They had no idea that their text messages about getting rid of Simone and taking everything had been saved and backed up. Most of all, they had no idea that by signing those divorce papers so calmly, so quickly, Simone had just triggered the final phase of a plan 6 months in the making. She picked up her phone and sent a text to Patricia Holmes, her attorney. "They served me. Papers signed. Execute phase 2. The response came immediately, "Game on. They'll regret this by Friday." Simone looked at the calendar. Today was Tuesday. She had 3 days to prepare for the moment when Trevor and Bethany's world would explode. 3 days until they discovered that the quiet, unassuming wife they dismissed as weak and emotional was actually the smartest person in the room. 3 days until they learned that the divorce papers were the least of their problems. Simone started putting away groceries, humming softly. For the first time in months, she felt light. Free. Ready. The game was just beginning and she held all the winning cards. 6 months earlier, Simone had been a different person. Trusting. Hopeful. Convinced that her marriage was solid despite the rough patches. She'd made excuses for Trevor's distance, blamed his stress at work, told herself that 12 years together meant something. That morning in late February had changed everything. She'd been looking for their tax documents, searching through Trevor's home office while he was at work. They had an appointment with their accountant, and she needed the investment statements he'd been handling. She'd pulled open his desk drawer, rifling through files, when a credit card statement caught her eye. It wasn't their joint card. It was one she'd never seen before. Her hands had frozen on the paper. Charges at expensive restaurants, places they'd never been together. Hotel rooms in the city, despite the fact that they lived only 20 minutes away. Jewelry purchases from stores she'd never received gifts from. Lingerie from boutiques she'd never shopped at. The dates went back 8 months. Simone had sat in Trevor's chair, that statement in her shaking hands, and felt her world tilt. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't a one-time thing. This was systematic, ongoing, deliberate. She'd wanted to scream, to throw things, to call Trevor immediately and demand answers. But something had stopped her. Maybe it was instinct. Maybe it was self-preservation. Maybe it was the sudden, crystal-clear knowledge that if Trevor was hiding this credit card, he was hiding other things too. So instead of confronting him, Simone had done something she'd never done before. She'd started investigating. She'd photographed the statement with her phone. Then she'd carefully placed it back exactly where she'd found it, making sure everything looked undisturbed. She'd closed the drawer, left the office, and sat on their bed, her mind racing. That's when she'd made the decision that would change everything. She would find out the whole truth before saying a word. The next day, she'd hired Thomas Brighton, a private investigator recommended by a lawyer friend. Thomas was ex-FBI, methodical and thorough. He'd listened to her story without judgment, taken notes, and promised to be discreet. "I need you to understand something," he told her at that first meeting. "Once we start digging, we might find things you don't want to know. Are you sure you want the truth?" "I'm sure," Simone had said, surprised by how steady her voice was. "Whatever it is, I need to know." Thomas had delivered his first report 2 weeks later. His findings had been worse than she'd imagined. Trevor was having an affair with Bethany Richardson, his assistant at Callahan Industries where he worked as chief financial officer. The affair had started 10 months ago at a company retreat. They met regularly at hotels, at her apartment, sometimes even in Trevor's office after hours when the building was empty. But that wasn't the worst part. "Your husband has been moving money," Thomas had told her, spreading financial documents across her coffee table. This meeting had taken place here in her home, on a day when she'd known Trevor would be out of town. Large amounts. From company accounts into accounts I can't trace yet. Simone had studied the papers, her accounting degree from 15 years ago suddenly very useful. She could see the patterns. Regular transfers always just below the reporting threshold, always to numbered accounts. "He's embezzling," she'd said quietly. "It looks that way. But there's more." Thomas had pulled out another file. "These are loan applications for your house. Your home is mortgaged now, though you never signed anything." "That's impossible. I would have had to sign." Simone had stopped, realization dawning. "He forged my signature. Multiple times from what I can tell. The mortgage money went into one of those same numbered accounts. Your home equity, your savings accounts that you thought were in both names, he's been systematically draining everything." Simone had felt sick. This wasn't just an affair. This was financial abuse. This was theft on a massive scale. Why? She'd asked. Why steal from his own company? Why forge my signature? Thomas had hesitated before answering. I've seen this before. People who are planning to disappear. To start over somewhere else with someone else. They cash out everything they can, cover their tracks, and run. My guess? Your husband is planning to leave you with nothing and blame you for the missing money. That's when Simone had started to get angry. Not the hot, explosive anger of betrayal. This was cold and calculating. Trevor thought he was smart? She'd show him what smart really looked like. She'd hired Jerome Banks, a forensic accountant who'd worked on federal fraud cases. Jerome had spent 3 months tracing every dollar, documenting every forged signature, finding every hidden account. What he'd discovered had been staggering. Trevor and Bethany had stolen over $2 million from Callahan Industries. They'd created fake vendors, submitted fraudulent invoices, and siphoned money into offshore accounts. They'd used Simone's identity to open credit lines they'd maxed out and never paid. They'd even filed false tax returns in her name to explain income they were hiding. They're setting you up, Jerome had explained. When this eventually gets discovered, and it will, all the evidence points to you. Your signatures, your social security number, your name on all the accounts. They're planning to let you take the fall while they disappear with the money. Simone had sat in silence, absorbing this. Her husband of 12 years had not only betrayed her, he'd been actively trying to destroy her life. To frame her for crimes she'd never committed. To steal her identity, her home, her future, and leave her to face prison time. What do we do? She'd finally asked. Jerome had smiled grimly. We build a better case against them than they've built against you. We document everything. We prove the forgeries. We trace the money. And we hand it all to the right people. That had led to the third member of Simone's team, FBI Special Agent Dennis Carter. Dennis had been investigating financial irregularities at Callahan Industries for 6 months, completely independent of Simone's private investigation. When and what they'd found. This ties everything together, Dennis had said at their secret meeting at a coffee shop across town. We knew something was happening, but we couldn't pinpoint who. Your evidence puts it all on them. How long until you can arrest them? Simone had asked. We need to build an airtight case. These are federal crimes, fraud, embezzlement, identity theft, money laundering. We need time to trace all the accounts and secure all the evidence. 6 months, maybe more. So Simone had waited. For 6 long months, she'd gone home every night and pretended everything was normal. She'd smiled at Trevor over dinner. She'd asked about his day. She played the role of the unsuspecting wife while secretly feeding information to investigators. It had been the hardest thing she'd ever done. There were nights when Trevor came home late, smelling like another woman's perfume, and Simone had to bite her tongue to keep from screaming. There were weekends when he made excuses to go into the office, and she'd known he was meeting Bethany instead. But she'd also used that time wisely. She'd secured copies of all important documents. She'd opened new bank accounts Trevor didn't know about and slowly moved money into them. Money from her freelance consulting work, money from small accounts he didn't monitor. She'd changed the passwords on her personal accounts and set up identity theft alerts. She'd also hired Patricia Holmes, the best divorce attorney in the state. Patricia was known for being ruthless, strategic, and brilliant. She'd listened to Simone's story and immediately seen the bigger picture. Don't confront him yet, Patricia had advised. Let him think he's getting away with it. Let him serve you with divorce papers. Let him think you're weak and emotional and going to fall apart. Then we hit him with everything at once. Won't that look bad? Simone had asked. Like I was hiding things too? You were protecting yourself from a criminal, Patricia had countered. Everything we're doing is legal and necessary. You're gathering evidence of crimes being committed against you. That's not hiding, that's survival. So Simone had waited for this moment. For Trevor to be confident enough to ask for a divorce. For Bethany to be arrogant enough to deliver the papers personally. For both of them to think they'd won. Now, standing in her kitchen with those signed divorce papers behind her, Simone felt a grim satisfaction. They'd walked right into the trap. Her phone buzzed. A text from Thomas, her private investigator, subject and mistress meeting at her apartment. Celebrating. Audio surveillance confirms they're planning to leave the country next month. Another text from Jerome, final account traced. Total theft confirmed at $2.3 million. All documentation ready for federal prosecutor. Another from Dennis, warrants approved. Raid scheduled for Friday morning. Arrest to follow. And finally from Patricia, divorce countersuit filed. Included fraud claims, theft claims, and motion to freeze all joint assets. He'll be served tomorrow morning. Simone looked at her phone, reading each message twice. Everything was in place. Everything was ready. In 3 days, Trevor and Bethany would discover what happens when you underestimate a quiet woman. When you mistake kindness for weakness. When you confuse trust with stupidity. They thought they destroyed her. They had no idea she was about to destroy them. March had been brutal. Simone had spent her days maintaining her normal routine while her nights were consumed with evidence gathering. Thomas had installed surveillance equipment in her own home, with Patricia's legal approval, to catch Trevor in the act of accessing her documents or forging her signature. They'd caught him twice. The first time, Trevor had logged into her laptop using a password he must have watched her type. He'd accessed her email and deleted messages from her bank about suspicious account activity. Thomas's hidden cameras had caught everything. His face clearly visible, his fingers on her keyboard, the timestamp proving she'd been at her book club at the time. The second time had been even more damning. Trevor had printed out documents from her personal file cabinet, signed her name multiple times practicing her signature, and then used those practice sheets to forge loan applications. All on camera. All documented. All admissible in court. He's getting sloppy, Thomas had observed, reviewing the footage. Criminals always do when they think they're close to getting away with it. Simone had watched those videos over and over. This man she'd loved, this man she trusted with everything, deliberately and methodically destroying her financial life. Each viewing had hardened something inside her, burned away the last traces of doubt about what she was doing. Jerome's investigation had been even more revealing. The forensic accountant had traced money through 6 different countries, through shell corporations and fake businesses, through accounts that existed only on paper. He documented every transfer, every forged document, every fake invoice. This is actually impressive, Jerome had said, though his tone suggested he wasn't complimenting them. If they'd stopped at a few $100,000, they might have gotten away with it. But $2.3 million from a mid-sized company? That gets noticed. When? Simone had asked. When would it get noticed? My guess? They planned to disappear before the annual audit in August. That's when external auditors would have caught the discrepancies. But they made one crucial mistake. What? They used your identity for too much. When they eventually got caught, investigators would have looked at you first. But your digital footprint doesn't match. You were never at those banks. You never opened those accounts. Your actual signatures don't match the forged ones. Any decent investigator would have seen through it. So they would have been caught anyway? Eventually, yes. But by then, they'd be in a country with no extradition treaty, living off your stolen money while you dealt with the legal fallout. Now, we're flipping the script. The federal investigation had moved faster than expected. Dennis Carter had been coordinating with the IRS, the SEC, and the local prosecutor's office. He'd obtained warrants to examine Callahan Industries' financial records, to tap Trevor and Bethany's phones, to monitor their communications. They're getting nervous, Dennis had reported in early April. Phone calls between them are increasing. They're talking about moving up their timeline. How much time do we have? Simone had asked. They're planning to file their taxes with the fraudulent returns next week. That gives us probable cause for immediate action. We'll move before month's end. Simone had also been building her own exit strategy. With Patricia's help, she'd quietly separated her finances from Trevor's. Her paychecks from her freelance consulting work now went into accounts he couldn't access. She transferred her grandmother's jewelry to a safety deposit box at a different bank. She changed her will to remove Trevor as beneficiary. Smart women protect themselves first, Patricia had said approvingly. When this blows up, you need to be financially independent and secure. April had brought more disturbing revelations. Thomas discovered that Bethany had a history, 2 previous affairs with married men she'd worked for. Both had ended with the men divorcing their wives and Bethany moving on once the excitement wore off. She's a pattern player, Thomas had explained. She gets off on the conquest, on breaking up marriages. The actual relationship doesn't interest her long term. Does Trevor know this? Simone had asked. Probably not. Men like him think they're special. Think they're different. He has no idea she's already planning her next move. Indeed, Jerome had uncovered evidence that Bethany had her own hidden accounts, separate from the ones she shared with Trevor. She was skimming money from their joint theft, stealing from her partner in crime. There's no honor among thieves, Jerome had said with dark amusement. She's planning to take half the money and disappear on her own. What happens when Trevor finds out? That's when criminals make mistakes. When they turn on each other. By early May, everything was in place. The federal case was ready. Patricia's divorce countersuit was prepared. All the evidence was documented and backed up in multiple locations. They were just waiting for Trevor to make his move. He'll serve you soon, Patricia had predicted. He needs the divorce finalized before the company discovers the theft. That's his timeline. Divorce you, marry Bethany for appearance's sake, and disappear before anyone notices the missing money. How can you be sure? Because I've seen this before. Criminals who think they're smart always follow the same pattern. They think if they do everything quickly enough, they can outrun the consequences. Sure enough, in mid-May, Trevor had started making comments about their relationship, saying he felt distant, that they'd grown apart, that maybe they'd married too young. All the standard lines of someone preparing to ask for a divorce. Simone had played along perfectly. She'd looked hurt. She'd suggested counseling. She'd done everything a surprised, devastated wife would do. All while knowing that Patricia was preparing papers that would destroy him. The hardest part had been the lying. Not lying to Trevor, that had become easy. But lying to her friends, her family, her co-workers. Everyone who asked if everything was okay. Everyone who noticed she seemed stressed. She'd smiled and made excuses and told them everything was fine. Only 4 people knew the truth: Patricia, Thomas, Jerome, and Dennis. And they'd all been sworn to secrecy until the right moment. That moment was now here. Bethany had delivered the divorce papers. Trevor thought he'd won. They were both probably celebrating right now, thinking they'd pulled off the perfect crime. They had no idea that in 72 hours, federal agents would raid Callahan Industries. That Trevor would be arrested at his office in front of his colleagues. That Bethany would be arrested at her apartment. That both would be charged with fraud, embezzlement, identity theft, money laundering, and conspiracy. They had no idea that the woman they dismissed as weak and emotional had been the puppet master all along. Simone's phone rang. It was Patricia. "How are you feeling?" her attorney asked. "Honestly? Relieved. Tired. Ready for this to be over. It will be soon. The wheels are in motion now. By Monday, everything will be public. Are you prepared for that?" Simone thought about it. Her marriage ending. Trevor's arrest. The media attention. The whispers and stares. The questions from people who thought they knew her. "Yes," she said finally. "I'm ready. Whatever comes next, it has to be better than the last 6 months of lying." "It will be," Patricia assured her. "Trust me. When this is over, you're going to walk away with everything. Your reputation, your finances, your future. Meanwhile, he'll have nothing but a prison sentence." After they hung up, Simone walked through her house. She looked at the photos on the walls, her and Trevor at their wedding, on vacations, at family gatherings. So many years. So many memories. All poisoned now by his betrayal. She started taking them down. Not angrily, not sadly. Just methodically removing every trace of him from her space. These pictures would go in a box in the garage. Eventually she'd probably throw them away. But for now she just wanted them out of sight. Tomorrow Trevor would be served with her countersuit. He'd discover she wasn't just accepting his divorce terms, she was fighting back. That would shake him. Make him nervous. But he'd probably assume she was just being emotional, fighting a battle she couldn't win. Thursday he'd start getting calls from the federal prosecutor's office, asking him to come in for questioning. He'd probably refuse, call his own lawyer, start to panic. Friday the hammer would fall. Simone found herself smiling as she worked. Not a happy smile exactly, but a satisfied one. Justice was coming. Not the hot, immediate revenge of confrontation and drama, but the cold, certain revenge of consequences. Trevor had thought he could destroy her. Instead, he'd destroyed himself. And the best part? She'd barely had to do anything. She just documented his crimes and handed the evidence to people who cared about justice. He destroyed himself. She just made sure everyone saw it happen. The morning Trevor received Patricia's countersuit papers was a Thursday, and Simone made sure she wasn't home. She'd scheduled a breakfast meeting with her core team, Patricia, Jerome, and Dennis, at a restaurant across town. Thomas was there too, having delivered his final surveillance report. He received the papers at 8:47 this morning, Thomas reported, checking his notes. "Courier service, signed for personally. Based on the cameras I still have active in your living room." He read them, made 6 phone calls, and then left the house in a hurry. "Who'd he call?" Dennis asked. First call was to Bethany. Second through fourth were to various attorneys. Fifth was to his brother. Sixth was back to Bethany. Audio surveillance indicates panic. Patricia smiled grimly. Good. Let him panic. Let him burn through money on emergency attorney consultations. It won't help. She spread papers across the table, the countersuit she'd filed against Trevor. It was comprehensive and brutal. Simone had reviewed it multiple times, and each reading had given her a dark satisfaction. The suit demanded full forensic accounting of all marital assets. It included fraud allegations with attached evidence. It requested immediate freezing of all joint accounts. It claimed identity theft and demanded Trevor prove he hadn't forged her signature. It sought full restitution for stolen funds, plus damages, plus attorney fees. This is a nuclear option, Patricia had explained when they drafted it. We're not trying to settle. We're trying to expose everything. When a judge sees this level of documentation, they'll have to investigate. And that investigation will lead straight to the federal charges. Won't Trevor just run? Simone had asked. Once he sees this, won't he realize we know everything? He can't run yet, Jerome interjected. The offshore accounts are already frozen. I notified the international banking authorities last week. His passport has been flagged. If he tries to leave the country, he'll be detained. He doesn't know that though, Dennis added. He probably still thinks he has options. That arrogance will keep him here long enough for us to arrest him. Now, sitting in the restaurant, Simone felt the weight of what they'd accomplished. These 4 people, virtual strangers 6 months ago, had become her team, her protection, her strategic alliance against people who'd wanted to destroy her. Walk me through tomorrow one more time, she said to Dennis. I need to know exactly what happens. The FBI agent nodded. At 6 a.m., federal agents will secure the perimeter of Callahan Industries. At 6:30, we'll enter with warrants to seize financial records, computers, and specific documents. At 7 a.m., when Trevor arrives for work, he'll be detained and taken to federal offices for questioning. Can he refuse? He can, but it will look suspicious. And we'll arrest him anyway by noon based on the evidence we already have. We're just being thorough. What about Bethany? Different team will pick her up at her apartment at the same time. She'll be brought to the same facility. We'll question them separately, let them know the other is being questioned, and see if either one turns on the other. They will, Thomas said confidently. I've been monitoring their communications. The relationship is already strained. She's angry he hasn't left you yet. He's annoyed she's pushing him. Put them under federal pressure, and they'll tear each other apart. Patricia leaned forward. Here's what's important, Simone. After the arrests, there will be media. Your name will come up. You need to be prepared with a statement. What kind of statement? Simple. Factual. You discovered financial irregularities, hired professionals to investigate, cooperated fully with federal authorities, and are grateful justice is being served. Don't say anything emotional. Don't trash Trevor personally. Don't even mention the affair unless directly asked. Why not? The affair is part of this. Because, Patricia explained patiently, if you focus on the affair, people will think this is just a woman scorned seeking revenge. If you focus on the crimes, you're a victim of fraud protecting herself. The narrative matters. Simone absorbed this. She'd been living with the betrayal so long that it was hard to separate the emotional pain from the criminal actions. But Patricia was right. The crimes were what mattered legally. I'll write you a statement to review, Patricia continued. Memorize it. When reporters call, and they will, you'll be ready. What about my job? My friends? They're all going to find out. Let them, Patricia said firmly. You did nothing wrong. You were the victim of identity theft and fraud. Anyone who judges you for that isn't worth keeping in your life. Jerome cleared his throat. There's something else you should know. The forensic accounting revealed that Callahan Industries is going to owe you significant damages. You were an unwitting accomplice whose identity was stolen. They failed to catch internal fraud that victimized you. Your name and credit were damaged. They're going to settle quickly to avoid a larger lawsuit. How much? Conservatively? $500,000. Possibly more. Plus, you'll get back everything Trevor stole from your personal accounts. That's another $100,000 at least. And his pension and benefits will be part of the divorce settlement since they're marital assets he can't have access to from prison. Simone felt her breath catch. I'll have money? You'll have security, Jerome corrected. This isn't lottery winnings. This is restitution for crimes committed against you. But yes, you'll be financially stable. More than stable. For 6 months, Simone had been so focused on justice that she hadn't thought much about the aftermath. She'd been living carefully, saving every penny, worried about how she'd survive after the divorce. Now suddenly she was learning she'd not only survive, she'd thrive. "I don't want his money," she said quietly. "I just want him held accountable." "You can donate it to charity if you want," Patricia said. "But don't refuse what you're legally entitled to. That money can help other women in similar situations. Think bigger than just yourself." Thomas checked his phone. Speaking of Trevor, he's currently at a law office downtown. Been there for 2 hours. Probably getting emergency legal advice. "Too late for that," Dennis said. "No amount of legal maneuvering will help him now. The evidence is overwhelming." They spent the rest of breakfast going over final details. Simone's role was simple. Stay quiet, stay safe, and let the professionals handle everything. She didn't need to confront Trevor. She didn't need to gloat. She just needed to let justice run its course. As they left the restaurant, Patricia pulled Simone aside. "How are you really doing?" "Not legally, emotionally." Simone considered the question. "I'm okay. Angry sometimes. Sad sometimes. But mostly just ready. Ready for this chapter to be over. It will be soon. And then you get to write the next chapter yourself. No Trevor. No lies. Just you and whatever future you want to build." "That sounds nice." "It will be more than nice," Patricia promised. "You're going to be free. Truly free. And trust me, that's worth more than any settlement money." Simone drove home alone, her mind spinning. Tomorrow morning, everything would change. Trevor would be arrested. Bethany would be arrested. Their crimes would be exposed. The whispers and judgments would begin. But she was ready. She'd been preparing for this moment for 6 months. She'd built her team, gathered her evidence, and protected herself. Now all she had to do was let them do their jobs. That evening her phone rang. It was Trevor. She almost didn't answer, but curiosity won. "We need to talk," he said without preamble. His voice was tight with stress. "About what?" "These papers your attorney filed. These accusations." "Simone, what are you doing?" She felt a surge of anger at his tone, as if she was the one causing problems. "I'm protecting myself. You wanted a divorce. I'm making sure I'm protected in that divorce." "Protected? You're accusing me of fraud. Of forging your signature. This is insane." "Is it? Did you forge my signature, Trevor?" Silence on the other end. "Did you?" she pressed. It's complicated. Some paperwork needed both signatures and you were always busy, So you committed a felony." "It wasn't like that. I was just trying to handle things efficiently." "Trevor, I'm done with this conversation. Talk to your attorney. Have them talk to my attorney. That's how this works now." She hung up before he could respond. Her hands were shaking, but she felt oddly empowered. For 6 months she'd said nothing. Now finally she could start speaking her truth. Her phone rang again. This time it was Bethany. "You need to drop this lawsuit," Bethany said without introduction. "You're being ridiculous. Trevor was going to give you a fair settlement. Now you're making everything complicated." "Who is this?" Simone asked, though she knew perfectly well. "You know who this is. Drop the suit. Let Trevor go. Stop being difficult. Bethany, you broke into my house. You delivered divorce papers like you had any right to be involved in my marriage. You're sleeping with my husband. And you're calling me difficult. I didn't break in. Trevor gave me the key. To my house. The house I own half of. That's called trespassing. Oh please. You're just being petty because you're losing him. Grow up." Simone felt her jaw clench. "You know what? Tomorrow is going to be very interesting for you. I suggest you enjoy tonight. It might be your last free night for a while." She hung up. Then she blocked both numbers. Let them panic. Let them scramble. Let them make desperate phone calls and hire expensive attorneys. None of it would help. The wheels of justice were already turning, and nothing they did now could stop it. Simone made herself dinner, took a long bath, and went to bed early. Tomorrow would be a big day. The best day she'd had in a very long time. Friday morning began at 5:30 a.m. when Simone's alarm buzzed. She'd barely slept, adrenaline and anticipation keeping her awake most of the night. But now, as dawn broke, she felt oddly calm. Patricia had advised her to stay home today. "Let everything happen without you. Watch the news. Wait for my call. Don't go anywhere or talk to anyone until we know how everything played out." So Simone made coffee, turned on the local news, and waited. At 6:45 a.m. her phone buzzed. A text from Dennis. "In position. Operation starting now." She imagined federal agents swarming Callahan Industries. Cars blocking the parking lot. Officers with badges and warrants. Everyone who worked there would be arriving soon, walking into chaos. Including Trevor. At 7:15 her phone rang. It was Patricia. It's happening. Trevor was taken into custody at 7:02. Bethany was arrested at her apartment at 7:08. Both are being transported to federal offices for questioning. The media got tipped, don't know by who, and there are news crews at Callahan Industries right now. Already? This is a big story. White-collar crime, millions stolen, executive enough. At 7:30, the morning news cut to breaking coverage. A professionally dressed reporter stood outside Callahan Industries, emergency lights flashing behind her. We're here at Callahan Industries where FBI agents have just arrested Chief Financial Officer Trevor Mitchell on charges of fraud and embezzlement. Sources say Mitchell, along with his assistant Bethany Richardson, allegedly stole over $2 million from the company over the past year. Both are currently in federal custody. They showed footage of Trevor being let out in handcuffs. He looked shocked, disoriented, nothing like the confident man who'd signed divorce papers 3 days ago. Simone watched him stumble slightly, an agent's hand on his elbow guiding him to an unmarked car. She felt nothing. No satisfaction, no anger, no sadness. Just a strange numbness. Another text from Dennis. Subject 1 refusing to speak without attorney. Subject 2 already trying to cut a deal. Blaming everything on Subject 1. Simone smiled despite herself. Bethany was already turning on Trevor. Just like Thomas. Callahan Industries employees, all shocked and confused. The company released a statement saying they were cooperating fully with federal investigators and had no prior knowledge of the theft. At 11 a.m., Patricia called again. The prosecutor wants to talk to you. Today if possible. They need your statement for the record. What do I say? Everything. Tell them exactly when you discovered the affair, when you hired investigators, what you found. Be honest about the forged signatures, the stolen money, all of it. You're the victim here, act like one. The interview took place that afternoon at the federal prosecutor's office. Assistant U.S. Attorney Rachel Morgan was young, sharp, and thorough. She recorded everything as Simone walked through the entire timeline. When did you first suspect your husband was stealing from you? Rachel asked. When I found the credit card statement in February. But I didn't know about the company theft until my forensic accountant discovered it in March. Why didn't you confront your husband immediately? Because I was scared, Simone admitted. I didn't know how deep it went. I was afraid if I confronted him, he'd destroy evidence or hurt me financially even worse. I wanted to understand the full scope before making any moves. Smart, Rachel said approvingly. Most victims confront immediately and lose any chance of recovery. You did this right. They went through every piece of evidence. Every forged signature, every fake account, every illegal transfer. Simone provided copies of everything her team had gathered, all properly documented and dated. This is an incredibly strong case, Rachel said finally. Your husband and Ms. Richardson are facing 15 to 20 years each. More if they don't cooperate. Will they cooperate? Ms. Richardson is already trying. She's claiming your husband manipulated her, that she didn't know it was illegal, that he threatened her. Standard defense for someone caught red-handed. Is any of that true? Rachel smiled coldly. Not according to the text messages we recovered. She was an enthusiastic participant. But she might get a reduced sentence if she testifies against him fully. What about Trevor? He's not talking yet. His attorney is probably advising him to stay quiet. But we don't need his confession. We have everything we need to convict. The evidence you gathered is airtight. After the interview, Simone felt drained. She just spent 3 hours reliving the worst months of her life, explaining in detail how the man she'd loved had systematically betrayed and robbed her. But she'd also felt something unexpected, pride. She'd been smart. She'd been careful. She'd done everything right. And because of that, justice was happening. That evening, the story exploded on social media. Someone had leaked more details. About the affair, about the mistress delivering divorce papers, about Simone's strategic response. Suddenly she wasn't just a victim, she was a symbol. Woman turns tables on cheating husband, read one headline. Wife sends husband and mistress to prison, said another. Her name wasn't being used, privacy laws protected victims of identity theft, but people online were calling her a hero. Patricia called, laughing. Have you seen social media? You're trending. Is that good? It's complicated, but mostly good. Public sympathy is entirely on your side. Trevor and Bethany are being destroyed online. Every detail of their relationship is being dissected. Every crime is being discussed. They're going to have trouble finding a jury that isn't biased against them. I didn't want publicity. I know. But use it. The more people know Trevor is a criminal, the less anyone will blame you for the divorce. You're not the bitter ex-wife. You're a crime victim who fought back. The weekend was surreal. Simone's phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Friends, family, even old acquaintances reaching out. Everyone wanted to know if the news stories were about her. She was okay. They could help. She gave the same statement to everyone. I discovered financial crimes being committed, I cooperated with federal authorities, and I'm grateful justice is being served. That's all I can say right now. Monday brought more news. Trevor and Bethany had been formally charged with 16 counts of fraud, embezzlement, identity theft, and conspiracy. Bail was set at $1 million each. Neither could make it. They'd remain in federal custody until trial. Patricia filed emergency motions for full asset seizure. The judge approved immediately, freezing every account, every property, every asset Trevor had touched. He couldn't use stolen money to defend himself. He'd have to rely on a public defender. He's going to try to negotiate, Patricia predicted. His attorney will push for a plea deal. Less prison time in exchange for returning the money and testifying against Bethany. Will the prosecutor accept? Depends on how much he cooperates. But either way, he's going to prison. The question is just for how long. That week, Callahan Industries reached out through their attorneys. They wanted to settle Simone's claims immediately and quietly. They offered $600,000, compensation for the identity theft, the damage to her credit, the emotional distress. Take it, Patricia advised. It's a good offer, and fighting for more will take years. Simone accepted. Within days, she had a check for $600,000. More money than she'd ever seen in her life. Money that represented both her pain and her victory. Jerome completed the forensic accounting of Trevor's assets. Between his pension, his 401k, his portion of home equity, and other marital assets, Simone was entitled to another $300,000. You're looking at close to $1 million total, Jerome told her. That's financial security for life if you're smart with it. Simone could barely process it. Weeks ago, she'd been worried about how to afford rent after the divorce. Now she was essentially wealthy. Not rich but secure. Free. 2 weeks after the arrests, Trevor's attorney requested a meeting with Patricia. Trevor wanted to talk about the divorce. Absolutely not, Patricia said immediately. He's facing criminal charges. The divorce is secondary to that. He can deal with it after his trial. He's desperate. He knows he's going to prison. He's trying to control the one thing he still can, the divorce terms. What does he want? Probably to negotiate. To ask you to drop certain claims in exchange for him signing quickly. What should I do? Patricia smiled. Nothing. You have all the power now. Let him sit in jail and think about what he's done. Let him watch as everything he built gets taken apart piece by piece. Let him realize that the woman he dismissed as weak is the one who destroyed him. So Simone did nothing. She went about her life. She started seeing a therapist to process everything. She reconnected with friends she'd neglected during the worst months. She started planning what came next. She'd won. Trevor was going to prison. Bethany was going to prison. Justice had been served. But the victory felt hollow. Not because she regretted it, she didn't. But because 12 years of her life had been built on lies, and no amount of justice could give her that time back. What she needed now was a future. A new beginning. A chance to build something real. And for the first time in a long time, she had the resources and freedom to do exactly that. The preliminary hearing took place 6 weeks after the arrests. Simone hadn't planned to attend. Patricia said victims rarely did at this stage. But Rachel Morgan, the prosecutor, had called personally. I think you should be there, Rachel had said. Not for legal reasons. For yourself. Sometimes victims need to see justice happening with their own eyes. So on a humid July morning, Simone sat in the back of a federal courtroom, wearing a simple navy dress and her grandmother's pearl necklace for strength. Patricia sat beside her, a reassuring presence. Trevor was brought in first, wearing an orange jumpsuit, hands cuffed in front. He looked thinner, tired, nothing like the confident man she'd married. His eyes scanned the courtroom and landed on her. For a moment, their gazes locked. She saw shock in his expression. He hadn't expected her to be here. Maybe he'd thought she'd be too emotional, too weak to face him. Instead, she sat straight-backed and calm, her face expressionless. He looked away first. Bethany was brought in next, also in orange. She looked worse than Trevor, hair unwashed, face puffy from crying. She didn't look at Simone at all, keeping her eyes on the floor. "All rise," the bailiff called. Judge Morrison entered, an older woman with sharp eyes and no-nonsense demeanor. She reviewed the papers in front of her briefly before speaking. "This is a preliminary hearing for United States versus Trevor Mitchell and Bethany Richardson. 16 counts including fraud, embezzlement, identity theft, and conspiracy. How do the defendants plead?" Trevor's attorney stood. "Not guilty, Your Honor." Bethany's attorney stood. "My client wishes to enter a guilty plea to reduce charges in exchange for cooperation with the prosecution." The courtroom erupted in murmurs. Trevor's head whipped around to stare at Bethany, his expression one of pure betrayal. She kept her eyes down, refusing to look at him. Judge Morrison banged her gavel. "Order." Ms. Richardson's attorney approached the bench. Simone leaned toward Patricia. "She's pleading guilty?" "She's cutting a deal," Patricia whispered back. "Probably testifying against Trevor in exchange for a lighter sentence. Smart move for her, devastating for him." At the bench, the attorneys and prosecutors spoke in low tones. Simone couldn't hear what they were saying, but she could see Trevor's attorney looking increasingly agitated. After 10 minutes, Judge Morrison addressed the court. "Ms. Richardson's plea agreement is accepted pending her full cooperation with federal prosecutors. Mr. Mitchell's plea of not guilty is entered. Trial date is set for September 15th. Your Honor," Rachel stood. "The prosecution would like to present evidence for the record regarding bail." "Proceed." What followed was devastating. Rachel walked the court through the entire scheme. Every fake account, every forged signature, every stolen dollar. She showed bank records, text messages, emails. She presented Trevor and Bethany's correspondence discussing how to handle Simone, how to frame her for the theft, how to disappear with the money. One email in particular made Simone's blood run cold. "Once the divorce is final, she'll be easy to discredit. Just a bitter ex-wife making accusations. By the time anyone investigates seriously, we'll be gone. And all the evidence points to her anyway." Trevor had written that. Had planned that. Had been confident enough to put it in writing. Rachel then presented the surveillance footage Thomas had captured. The courtroom watched on a large screen as Trevor, alone in Simone's home, practiced forging her signature. Watched him delete her emails. Watched him photograph her documents. The defendant believed he had complete control, Rachel narrated. He believed his victim was unaware and would remain so until it was too late. He had no idea that she'd been documenting his crimes for months, that she'd hired professionals, that she'd been cooperating with federal investigators. She turned to address the judge directly. "This is a calculated, premeditated series of crimes spanning over a year. The defendants stole $2.3 million, committed identity theft against Mrs. Mitchell, and attempted to destroy her financially while framing her for their crimes. They showed no remorse, no conscience, no hesitation. They only stopped because they were caught." Judge Morrison's expression grew harder with each piece of evidence. When Rachel finally sat down, the judge looked at Trevor with undisguised disgust. "Mr. Mitchell, your bail is revoked. You will remain in federal custody until trial. Given the severity of these charges and the evidence presented, I find you to be both a flight risk and a danger to potential witnesses." Trevor's attorney started to object, but the judge cut him off. The defendant had plans to flee the country. He has no ties to the community that would ensure his appearance. Bail is denied. As Trevor was let out, he looked at Simone one more time. This time there was hatred in his eyes. Pure, undiluted rage. As if she had done something to him, rather than simply exposing what he'd done to her. She met his gaze steadily. She wasn't afraid of him anymore. He had no power over her now. After the hearing, Rachel approached them in the hallway. That went well. Having Ms. Richardson cooperate is huge. Her testimony alone is enough to convict him. "What will she get?" Simone asked. 8 to 10 years probably. She's still going to prison. She committed serious crimes. But it could have been 20 without the deal. And Trevor? 15 to 25 depending on how the trial goes. If he's smart, he'll take a plea deal too. But men like him usually aren't smart about these things. They think they can talk their way out. Patricia added, "The divorce will be finalized while he's awaiting trial. He has no assets to fight with, no credibility and no sympathy. The judge will grant you everything you're asking for." Indeed, 2 weeks later, Simone stood in a different courtroom, family court this time, as a judge dissolved her marriage. Trevor wasn't there. He'd waived his right to attend. His attorneys simply accepted all of Patricia's terms. Simone got the house, the cars, Trevor's pension, and all remaining marital assets. Trevor got nothing except his legal troubles. The whole proceeding took less than 20 minutes. Is that it? Simone asked afterward. Am I divorced? You're divorced, Patricia confirmed. Officially single as of today. Simone had expected to feel something dramatic. Relief, sadness, anger. Instead, she just felt tired. Tired of Trevor, tired of courtrooms, tired of legal proceedings. She wanted it all to be over. One more thing, Patricia said, handing her a folder. These came this morning. Inside were property deeds. The house was officially in Simone's name alone. No more joint ownership. No more tied to Trevor. Just hers. It's really over, Simone said softly. The legal part is. The emotional part, that's up to you. That evening, Simone did something she hadn't done in over a year. She invited friends over. Real friends, people who'd stood by her through everything. They brought wine and food and sat in her living room now, not theirs, and celebrated. To Simone, her friend Rachel toasted. The smartest woman I know. To justice, another friend added. To fresh starts, Simone said, raising her own glass. They drank, and for the first time in months, Simone felt something approaching happiness. Not the giddy happiness of her early marriage, but something deeper and more real. The satisfaction of having survived. Of having fought back. Of having won. Later, after her friends left, she walked through the house. Felt different now. Lighter. Like Trevor's presence had been a weight she hadn't realized she was carrying until it was gone. She thought about the preliminary hearing. About watching Trevor be led away in handcuffs. About Bethany's guilty plea. About the evidence of their betrayal laid bare for everyone to see. Some people might have felt guilty for destroying 2 lives. But Simone felt none of that. She hadn't destroyed anything, they destroyed themselves. She just refused to be destroyed along with them. Her phone buzzed. A text from Jerome. Callahan Industries completed their internal audit. They're filing additional charges for securities fraud. Your evidence helped them discover even more irregularities. Trevor's looking at 30 years now instead of 20. 30 years. Trevor would be in his 70s before he got out. His entire career, his freedom, his future. All gone because he'd gotten greedy and thought he was smarter than everyone else. Simone didn't feel joy at that number. But she didn't feel sympathy either. She felt nothing. Trevor had made his choices. Now he'd live with the consequences. She'd made her choices too. To investigate instead of confront. To gather evidence instead of react emotionally. To build a case instead of just walking away. And those choices had led to justice. Not revenge. Justice. There was a difference. Revenge would have been dramatic and petty, slashing tires, destroying property, causing pain for the sake of pain. Justice was calm and methodical. Documenting crimes, cooperating with authorities, letting the legal system work. Simone had chosen justice. And justice had chosen her. Now she just needed to figure out what came next. The trial began on a Tuesday in September. Simone hadn't planned to attend every day, but Patricia convinced her to show up for opening statements. Let Trevor see you in the gallery every day, Patricia had advised. Let him know you're not hiding. Not ashamed. Not broken. It'll mess with his head. So Simone sat in the same spot in the back of the courtroom each day, dressed professionally, face calm. Sometimes friends joined her. Sometimes she came alone. But she was there, a constant reminder to Trevor of what he'd lost and what he'd done. The media coverage was intense. Court TV had picked up the case. Legal analysts debated the evidence on cable news. Social media exploded with opinions, with most people firmly on Simone's side. The wife who destroyed her cheating husband and his mistress became a story people couldn't stop talking about. Think pieces appeared in magazines about women fighting back, about white-collar crime, about the importance of financial literacy in marriage. Simone hadn't sought the attention, but she learned to manage it. Rachel had coached her on how to handle media requests. Most she declined, but she did agree to one interview with a respected journalist. The interview aired 3 weeks into the trial. Simone sat in her living room, composed and articulate, and told her story. When did you first realize something was wrong? The journalist asked. When I found a credit card statement I didn't recognize. From that moment, I knew I needed to investigate before reacting. Most women would have confronted their husband immediately. Why didn't you? Because I needed to know the truth. All of it. If I'd confronted him, he might have hidden more evidence, or convinced me I was being paranoid. I needed facts. What did you feel when you discovered the full extent of the betrayal? Simone paused, choosing her words carefully. Honestly? Angry. But also determined. He tried to destroy me financially and legally. I wasn't going to let that happen. Some people are calling what you did revenge. How do you respond to that? It wasn't revenge. It was justice. I didn't want to hurt him. I wanted to stop him from hurting me more. There's a difference between revenge and self-protection. What do you want other women to learn from your experience? This was the question Simone had been waiting for. Trust your instincts. Something feels wrong, investigate. Protect yourself financially. Know where your money is, what accounts exist in your name, what your credit report says. And don't be afraid to ask for help from professionals. I couldn't have done this alone. The interview went viral. Suddenly Simone wasn't just a victim or a symbol, she was an educator. Women started reaching out, sharing their own stories, asking for advice. One message particularly struck her. My husband has been acting suspicious. After seeing your interview, I checked our accounts. He's been hiding money. I just hired a private investigator. Thank you for showing me it's okay to protect myself. Simone read that message 3 times. This woman might have lost everything if she hadn't watched the interview. If she hadn't learned that investigating wasn't paranoid or wrong, it was smart. That's when the idea formed. She couldn't respond to every message personally, but she could create resources, guides, information, ways to help women protect themselves before they became victims. She reached out to Jerome. Would you help me write a book? About financial red flags in relationships? Warning signs? How to protect yourself? Jerome was immediately interested. Absolutely. This information could save people from going through what you went through. They spent the next month working on it while the trial continued. The book wasn't long, just 60 pages of clear, practical advice. How to check credit reports. What documents to secure. When to hire a forensic accountant. Signs that a partner might be stealing or hiding money. They self-published it online as a free download. Within a week, it had been downloaded 50,000 times. Within a month, 200,000. Publishing companies started reaching out, wanting to distribute a physical version. Meanwhile, the trial was going exactly as Rachel had predicted. Bethany testified against Trevor, detailing every crime, every conversation, every plan. Her testimony was devastating and detailed. He told me Simone would never notice, Bethany said on the stand. He said she was too trusting, too stupid to figure it out. He said he'd been stealing from her for months and she hadn't caught on. Simone watched Trevor's face as his former mistress testified. He looked furious, betrayed, ironic given what he'd done to Simone. He clearly hadn't expected Bethany to turn on him so completely. The prosecution also brought in experts. The forensic accountant who'd traced the money. The handwriting analyst who'd confirmed the forged signatures. The FBI agent who'd investigated the money laundering. Trevor's defense attorney tried to argue that the signatures might be legitimate, that Simone might have signed things and forgotten, that the money transfers could be explained. But the evidence was overwhelming. The jury deliberated for 3 hours. They came back with guilty verdicts on all 16 counts. Simone was in the courtroom when the verdict was read. She watched Trevor's face crumble as each guilty was pronounced. Watched his attorney pat his shoulder uselessly. Watched the bailiff prepare to take him away. Before he was let out, Trevor turned to look at her one last time. She met his eyes steadily. She didn't smile. Didn't gloat. Just looked at him with the same calm expression she'd maintained throughout the trial. He mouthed something. She couldn't be sure, but it looked like, I'm sorry. Too little. Too late. Sentencing was scheduled for 6 weeks later. Rachel predicted 22 years, possibly more. Trevor would be 67 when he got out, assuming he served the full sentence. How do you feel? Patricia asked afterward. Relieved, Simone said honestly. It's really over now. The criminal trial is, but you've built something bigger than just this case. It was true. Simone's book had become a movement. Women were sharing it, adding their own stories, creating support groups. She was getting requests to speak at events, to give interviews, to help other victims navigate similar situations. I never wanted to be famous for this, Simone admitted. You're not famous. You're influential. There's a difference. You're using what happened to you to help others. That's powerful. 2 weeks after the verdict, a major publishing house offered Simone a book deal. Not just to publish the guide she'd already written, but to expand it into a full memoir with educational content. The advance was substantial, enough to fund what Simone was already planning. I want to start a foundation, she told Patricia and Jerome at their next meeting. To help other victims of financial fraud in relationships. Provide free forensic accounting services to people who can't afford them. Connect them with attorneys who understand these cases. That's a big undertaking, Patricia warned. I know. But I have the resources now. The money from the settlements, the book advance, my own savings. And I have the knowledge. I know how the system works, what help people need, what resources are missing. What would you call it? Jerome asked. Simone had already thought about this. The Fresh Start Foundation. Because that's what victims need, a chance to start over with support and resources. They worked through the logistics. Simone would need to set up a non-profit, hire staff, establish protocols. But it was doable. More than doable, it was necessary. The foundation launched 3 months after Trevor's sentencing hearing, where he'd received 25 years. The judge had been harsh, noting his complete lack of remorse and his attempts to frame his wife for his crimes. Bethany had received 10 years. She'd cried through her sentencing, begged for mercy, insisted she'd been manipulated. The judge wasn't sympathetic. You were a willing participant in serious crimes, Judge Morrison had said. You helped steal over $2 million. You helped forge documents. You participated in planning to frame an innocent woman. Your cooperation is noted and has reduced your sentence. But make no mistake, you earned every year of this prison term. Now both were in federal prison and Simone was free. Not just legally free but emotionally free. She'd moved past the betrayal, past the anger, past the hurt. She'd built something meaningful from her pain. The Fresh Start Foundation's first client was a woman named Brenda, who discovered her husband was hiding assets during their divorce. Jerome did the forensic accounting pro bono. Patricia handled the legal work. Within 3 months, they'd uncovered $500,000 Brenda's husband had tried to hide. You saved my life, Brenda told Simone at their final meeting. Without your foundation, I would have lost everything. That's when Simone knew she'd made the right choice. This was her purpose now. Not just surviving her own betrayal but helping others survive theirs. The best revenge wasn't destroying Trevor and Bethany, though they'd certainly been destroyed. The best revenge was building a life so meaningful, so impactful, so successful that his betrayal became the catalyst for something good. She turned her worst experience into her greatest strength. And she wasn't done yet. The first year after the trial was transformative. Simone threw herself into building the Fresh Start Foundation, and it grew faster than she'd anticipated. She hired a small staff, a case manager, an accountant, a legal coordinator. They worked out of a modest office downtown, helping an average of 20 clients per month. Each case was different, but the patterns were similar. Spouses hiding assets, partners draining joint accounts, financial abuse disguised as marriage. Every client reminded Simone of her own story, and every successful case felt like another victory. She also finished the expanded version of her book. Financial Red Flags, Protecting Yourself in Relationships, was published in hardcover and became an unexpected bestseller. Women's groups invited her to speak. Financial literacy organizations wanted partnerships. Domestic violence shelters requested bulk copies. You've become an advocate, her editor told her at a book signing. That's bigger than being an author. Simone hadn't set out to become anyone's voice or symbol. She just wanted justice and to help others avoid her fate. But she couldn't deny the platform she'd built or the responsibility that came with it. The media attention had mostly died down, which she appreciated. She gave occasional interviews when requested but mostly focused on her work. She'd learned to separate her public role from her private life, to protect the peace she'd rebuilt. That peace included therapy. Twice a week, Simone met with Dr. Paula Henderson, processing the trauma of Trevor's betrayal and the stress of the public trial. Some sessions were hard, dredging up pain she tried to bury. But slowly she was healing. You did everything right, Dr. Henderson told her during one session. But that doesn't mean you weren't hurt. It doesn't mean you don't get to be angry or sad or confused. I am angry sometimes, Simone admitted. Not at the outcome, that's justice. But at the time I lost. 12 years with someone who was lying to me. Those years weren't all lies. You were authentic even if he wasn't. Your love was real even if his wasn't. Don't let him steal the good memories along with everything else. It was advice Simone tried to remember. There had been good times with Trevor, especially early on. She didn't have to erase those to accept what he'd become later. She also reconnected with parts of herself she'd lost during her marriage. She'd always wanted to learn pottery, but Trevor had dismissed it as a waste of time. Now she took classes on Saturday mornings, losing herself in the feel of clay and the quiet satisfaction of creating something with her hands. She traveled too, short trips at first, then longer ones. She visited national parks, stayed in small bed and breakfasts, explored places Trevor had never wanted to go. Each trip felt like reclaiming her independence. Her friend Rachel noticed the change. "You look different," she said over lunch one day. "Lighter somehow. I feel lighter. For the first time in years, I'm just living for myself. No one to answer to. No one to accommodate. Just me figuring out what I want." "And what do you want?" Simone considered the question. To keep doing this work. To help more people. To build something that matters. And maybe, eventually, to trust someone again. That last part surprised her. She hadn't thought she'd ever want another relationship. The betrayal had seemed too deep, the scars too permanent. But Dr. Henderson had been working with her on separating Trevor's actions from the concept of partnership itself. "Not everyone is Trevor," her therapist had said. "Most people are honest. Most people are kind. You can be careful without being closed off." Still, Simone wasn't actively looking. She was focused on her foundation, her book, her healing. Something happened naturally, fine. But she wasn't going to force it. Meanwhile, the foundation continued to grow. They secured grant funding from several women's organizations. Corporate sponsors signed on. They expanded their services to include support groups and financial literacy workshops. Simone's favorite part was the direct client work. Meeting women who'd been where she'd been, scared and confused and trying to protect themselves. Being able to tell them, "I've been there and I survived," meant everything. One client, Teresa, had been married to a man who controlled all their finances. She didn't have access to bank accounts, didn't know what bills existed in her name, had no idea what their financial situation actually was. "I want to leave, but I'm terrified," Teresa confessed. "What if he's hidden everything? What if I end up with nothing?" "That's exactly why we're here," Simone assured her. "We'll find out the truth. We'll make sure you're protected. You don't have to do this alone." Jerome's forensic accounting uncovered that Teresa's husband had substantial assets he'd hidden, including a second house he claimed was a business property. With that information, Teresa was able to negotiate a fair divorce settlement that gave her security. "Thank you," Teresa said at their last meeting, tears in her eyes. "You gave me my life back." Those words never got old. Each client who walked away protected, informed, and empowered felt like another brick in the foundation Simone was building, not just the organization but her own sense of purpose. She also started mentoring young women in finance careers. She visited universities, talked to business students, emphasized the importance of financial independence and literacy. She wanted the next generation to be smarter than she'd been, more aware of red flags, more confident in protecting themselves. "You're making a real difference," Patricia told her after one such speaking engagement. "This foundation, the book, the advocacy, it's all bigger than just your case now." "That's the point," Simone said. "If my suffering can prevent someone else's, then it wasn't wasted." The second-year anniversary of Trevor's arrest came and went quietly. Simone marked it privately, reflecting on how far she'd come. From the woman who'd opened her door to find her husband's mistress waiting with divorce papers, to a woman running a successful nonprofit and helping others navigate similar betrayals. She transformed her pain into purpose. That was the revenge Trevor could never take from her. The fact that his worst actions had led to her best work. Some people asked if she ever visited him in prison. She didn't. She'd moved on, and there was nothing he could say that she needed to hear. His apologies, if he even felt them, were irrelevant now. Bethany had written her once from prison, a rambling letter full of self-pity and vague apologies. Simone had read it once, then filed it away. She didn't need Bethany's remorse either. She needed to keep moving forward. By the end of her second year post-divorce, Simone had helped over 400 clients through the foundation. She'd spoken at 20 universities. Her book was in its 5th printing. She'd been featured in major publications as an expert on financial abuse. But more importantly, she'd rebuilt herself. Not into who she was before Trevor, that woman was gone. But into someone stronger, wiser, more resilient. Someone who knew her worth and wouldn't settle for less. Someone who'd been broken and had used the pieces to build something beautiful. That was the real victory. Not the courtroom verdicts or the prison sentences or the media coverage. But the quiet, internal knowledge that she'd survived the worst betrayal and come out stronger. She was ready for whatever came next. And for the first time in a long time, she was excited about the future rather than haunted by the past. Simone met Nathan Rodriguez at the most unexpected place, a hardware store. She was buying supplies for a bookshelf project, determined to build it herself rather than hire someone. He was in the same aisle, looking confused by paint samples. "Excuse me," he'd said, his voice apologetic. "Do you know the difference between eggshell and satin finish?" She'd looked up, ready to give a polite but brief answer, and found herself face to face with a man about her age with kind eyes and an embarrassed smile. "Eggshell is flatter, better for low-traffic areas," she'd explained. "Satin has a slight sheen, holds up better to cleaning. What are you painting?" "A nursery. My sister's having a baby and I promised to help. But I have no idea what I'm doing." They'd ended up talking for 20 minutes about paint, then about his sister, then about Simone's bookshelf project. When he'd offered to help her load the wood into her car, she'd accepted. When he'd asked if she'd like to grab coffee sometime, she'd surprised herself by saying yes. Their first date had been refreshingly normal. No pretense, no games, no red flags. Nathan was an architect, recently divorced himself, with no children and no drama. He talked openly about his failed marriage without bitterness, acknowledged his own mistakes, and seemed genuinely interested in hearing about her life. "I've seen you on the news," he'd admitted over coffee. "The financial abuse case. The foundation you started. It's impressive." Simone had tensed, waiting for the inevitable questions or judgments. But Nathan had simply added, "That took incredible courage. Most people wouldn't have the strength to fight back like that." "Most people don't have to," she'd said. "True. But when they do, I hope they find the same determination you did." They dated slowly. Nathan never pushed for more than she was comfortable with. He respected her boundaries, understood when she needed space, and was patient with her residual trust issues. "I'm not Trevor," he'd said once, after she'd apologized for being hesitant about combining finances for a shared dinner bill. "I don't need access to your accounts. I'm not trying to control anything. I just want to get to know you." Dr. Henderson had been cautiously optimistic. "He sounds healthy. But take your time. There's no rush." Simone did take her time. She introduced Nathan to her friends slowly. Waited months before letting him meet her family. Kept their relationship private from the foundation clients and the media. This was hers, separate from everything else. Nathan seemed to understand that. He never asked to be featured in her public life. Never tried to capitalize on her platform. He was content to be her private support, the person she came home to after long days at the foundation. They'd been dating for 8 months when he invited her to meet his family. His sister was hosting Thanksgiving and Nathan wanted Simone there. "Are you sure?" she'd asked. "That's a big step." "I'm sure. But only if you're comfortable. No pressure." Simone had accepted, nervous but ready. Nathan's family was warm and welcoming. His sister Anna thanked her for helping Nathan find happiness again. His parents asked respectful questions about her work without prying into her past. Over dinner, Nathan's nephew had asked innocently, "Uncle Nathan, are you going to marry Simone?" The table had gone quiet. Nathan had looked at Simone, clearly embarrassed, but before he could deflect, Simone had smiled. "That's not something we're thinking about right now," she told the boy gently. "But we're very happy together." Later, driving home, Nathan had apologized. "I'm sorry about that. Kids have no filter." "It's okay. It actually made me realize something." "What?" "That I could imagine marrying again. Someday. With the right person. I didn't think I'd ever feel that way." Nathan had reached for her hand. "For what it's worth, I could imagine that too. Someday. When you're ready. No rush." The foundation continued to flourish. They'd helped over 1,000 clients by now, with a success rate Simone was proud of. Most clients were able to protect their assets and get fair settlements. Some, like Simone herself, had uncovered criminal activity and seen their abusers prosecuted. She'd hired more staff, opened a second office, and established partnerships with law schools to provide pro bono legal services. The organization was becoming exactly what she'd envisioned, a comprehensive resource for victims of financial abuse. She'd also started receiving speaking invitations from corporate America. Companies wanted her to train their HR departments on recognizing financial abuse warning signs. Banks wanted her to develop programs for identifying and helping customers in abusive situations. "You're changing systems," Patricia observed during one of their now regular lunch meetings. "Not just helping individual clients, but changing how institutions respond to financial abuse. That's the goal. Individual help is crucial, but systemic change prevents more cases from happening in the first place." 3 years after Trevor's arrest, Simone received an unexpected letter. It was from his attorney, informing her that Trevor wanted to contact her directly. He'd been in prison for 2 years and was apparently seeking to make amends. "You don't have to respond," Patricia advised when Simone called about it. "I know. But I'm curious what he could possibly have to say." She authorized limited contact through the attorney. A week later, she received a letter from Trevor himself. The handwriting was still familiar, though the tone was completely different from anything he'd written during their marriage. In the letter, Trevor took full responsibility for his actions. He apologized for the betrayal, the theft, the attempt to frame her. He acknowledged that he'd been greedy, cruel, and cowardly. He said he deserved every year of his sentence and more. "I won't insult you by asking for forgiveness," he wrote. "I don't deserve it. But I wanted you to know that I understand now how much I hurt you. Prison has given me time to reflect on what I destroyed, not just our marriage but a good person who trusted me. I hope you've built a good life without me. You always deserved better than what I gave you." Simone read the letter 3 times. Part of her wanted to dismiss it as manipulation, another con. But it felt genuine. And ultimately, it didn't matter whether his remorse was real or not. She'd moved on. She wrote back once briefly, "I've built a good life. I hope you use your time to become a better person. But I won't be responding to future letters. What's done is done." She sent it and felt nothing. No anger, no satisfaction, no lingering pain. Just closure. "How do you feel?" Dr. Henderson asked at their next session. "Complete," Simone said. "Like the last chapter of that story is finally closed." "And the new chapter?" Simone smiled. "I'm excited about it. The foundation is growing. Nathan and I are happy. I'm doing work that matters. I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be." 1 year later, Nathan proposed. Not with a huge production or public display, but quietly at home on an ordinary Tuesday evening. "I don't want to rush you," he'd said, holding a simple ring. "And I don't want you to feel pressured. But I love you. I respect you. And I'd be honored if you'd marry me. On your timeline. With your terms. Whatever makes you feel safe." Simone had looked at the ring, then at Nathan, then back at the ring. She thought about Trevor's proposal years ago, flashy and public and full of pressure. This was different. This was genuine. "Yes," she'd said. "Not because I'm supposed to or because it's what people expect. But because I want to. Because I trust you. Because I love you too." They planned a small wedding, just family and close friends. No drama, no excessive spending, no pressure. Just 2 people choosing each other with full awareness and consent. Patricia served as her maid of honor. Dr. Henderson was invited. Jerome and his wife attended. Even Dennis Carter, the FBI agent who'd helped build the case against Trevor, came with his partner. At the reception, Patricia made a toast. To Simone, who showed all of us what courage looks like. Who turned betrayal into purpose, pain into power, and loss into love. May your future be everything your past wasn't. They raised their glasses and Simone felt tears, happy tears for the first time in years. This was her new beginning. Not a second chance at the same story, but a completely different story altogether. One built on honesty, respect, and genuine partnership. Trevor was 15 years into his sentence now. Bethany had been paroled after serving 7 years, and Simone heard she'd moved to another state, working quietly and keeping a low profile. Neither was part of Simone's world anymore. Her world now was the foundation, her marriage, her continued advocacy work. She'd published a second book about rebuilding after betrayal. She'd been invited to speak at the UN about financial abuse as a human rights issue. She'd built an entire life from the ashes of her destroyed marriage. And it was better than anything she'd had before. Because this life was authentic. This life was hers. This life was built on truth instead of lies. And that made all the difference. 5 years after signing those divorce papers, Simone stood in the lobby of her foundation's new building. It was a beautiful space, glass and steel, modern and welcoming, with the Fresh Start Foundation logo prominently displayed. This wasn't just an office. This was a resource center. The first floor housed a legal clinic where clients could meet with attorneys. The second floor had financial counseling offices where Jerome's team of forensic accountants worked. The third floor hosted support groups, workshops, and educational programs. They'd served over 5,000 clients now. They'd recovered millions in hidden assets. They'd helped hundreds of women escape financially abusive relationships. They'd trained thousands more to recognize warning signs before becoming victims. "This is incredible," Nathan said, walking through the space with her. They'd been married for 2 years now, and he'd been nothing but supportive of the foundation's growth. "You built this." "We built this," Simone corrected. "Every client who shared their story. Every volunteer who gave their time. Every donor who believed in the mission. This is bigger than just me. But she knew what he meant. She'd been the catalyst. Her story had sparked something that grew beyond her wildest expectations. She turned her worst experience into her greatest contribution. That afternoon, they held the building's official opening ceremony. Local politicians spoke. Donors were recognized. But the most powerful moment came when 3 former clients stood up to share their stories. The first was Teresa, who'd left her controlling husband 5 years ago with the foundation's help. She now ran her own business and had custody of her children. The second was Brenda, who discovered her husband hiding assets during their divorce. She'd recovered enough money to put her kids through college and had started her own nonprofit helping elderly people avoid financial scams. The third was a young woman named Kayla, who'd caught her boyfriend stealing from her at age 23. She'd graduated college debt-free thanks to recovering the stolen money and now worked as a financial crimes investigator for the FBI. "We're not victims anymore," Kayla said, looking directly at Simone. "We're survivors. And we're stronger because of what we went through and because of the help we received. Thank you for showing us that betrayal doesn't have to be the end of our stories, it can be the beginning of better ones." Orchestrated final chapter conclusion showcasing protagonist's triumphant resolution. The user wants 10 chapters of 1,000 words each. I'm at chapter 10 now. Let me make sure this chapter is substantial and wraps up the story beautifully with the happy ending the user requested. I need to continue with Simone's ultimate victory and show her thriving. The audience applauded, and Simone felt overwhelmed with emotion. This was why she did this work. Not for recognition or praise, but to see other women reclaim their power and build new lives. After the ceremony, Simone gave a tour to a journalist from a major magazine doing a feature on the foundation. They walked through each floor and the journalist took notes on everything. "What would you say is your biggest accomplishment?" the journalist asked. Simone thought carefully. Changing the narrative. Financial abuse used to be something people didn't talk about. Women were ashamed to admit it happened to them. Now, because of our work and the work of organizations like ours, people understand it's a crime, not a personal failure. That shift in understanding saves lives. Do you ever regret how things went down with your ex-husband? No. Trevor made his choices. He committed crimes. He faced consequences. I have no regrets about seeking justice. What about the affair? Does that part still hurt? Simone looked out the window at the city. The affair was a symptom of deeper problems. His dishonesty, his greed, his willingness to hurt people to get what he wanted. If it hadn't been Bethany, it would have been someone else. I'm grateful I discovered it when I did before he could do even more damage. That evening, Simone and Nathan hosted a small dinner party at their home. Patricia and her husband came, along with Jerome and his wife and several staff members from the foundation. It was informal and warm, filled with laughter and good food. "A toast," Patricia said, raising her glass. "To Simone, who proves every day that the best revenge is a life well lived." "It's not revenge," Simone corrected with a smile. "It's justice and growth." "Fine." "To Simone, who proves that justice and growth look better than any revenge could." They drank, and Nathan squeezed her hand under the table. Later, as they cleaned up together, he said, "I'm so proud of you. Not just for the foundation but for how you've handled everything. You could have let what Trevor did make you bitter or closed off. Instead, you used it to help others." "I had good examples," Simone said, thinking of Patricia's fierce advocacy, Jerome's patient investigation, Dr. Henderson's compassionate guidance. "I learned that strength isn't about never falling, it's about getting back up and helping others do the same." The next morning, Simone opened her laptop to find an email that made her pause. It was from a literary agent, but the subject line wasn't about her books. It read, "Film production interest." Inside, the agent explained that a production company wanted to option her story for a movie. They'd been following her work and thought her journey from victim to advocate would inspire millions. Simone sat back processing this. Her story on screen. Not just the betrayal and the trial but the foundation, the work, the real impact. She called Patricia immediately. "They want to make a movie about my life." "What are you thinking?" "That it could help even more people. But also that I'd need creative control. I don't want this to be sensationalized or turned into a revenge fantasy. The point is the growth, not the gotcha moment. Then negotiate for that. If they want your story, they need to tell it right." Simone did negotiate. Art. She demanded script approval, consultation on portrayal, and that proceeds go to the foundation. To her surprise, the production company agreed to all her terms. They weren't interested in exploiting her story, they wanted to tell it authentically. The movie went into production a year later. Simone served as a consultant, ensuring the details were accurate and the message was clear. The focus wasn't on Trevor or Bethany or even the trial. It was on Simone's transformation, her strategic thinking, her determination to not just survive but to build something meaningful from her pain. When the movie premiered, it sparked a national conversation about financial abuse, about women's financial literacy, about the importance of trusting your instincts. The Fresh Start Foundation received thousands of new donation requests and client inquiries. But the most gratifying moment came from an unexpected source. 6 months after the premiere, Simone received a letter from a woman in Texas who'd watched the movie with her teenage daughters. "I've been in a financially abusive marriage for 15 years, the woman wrote. "I didn't have a name for it until I saw your movie. I've now contacted your foundation and started the process of protecting myself. More importantly, I've talked to my daughters about red flags to watch for. Because of your story, they'll be smarter than I was. They'll know to protect themselves. You didn't just save me, you might have saved my daughters from ever becoming victims in the first place." Simone read that letter to Nathan that night, her voice breaking with emotion. "That's everything," she said. "That's why I went through all of this, so women like her and her daughters would have a different story." 7 years after Trevor's arrest, Simone received notification that he was up for parole. As a victim, she had the right to submit a statement or attend the hearing. She chose to do neither. "I have nothing to say to him or about him," she told Patricia. "Whether he gets out early or serves his full sentence doesn't affect my life anymore." Trevor was denied parole. Apparently, he'd had disciplinary issues in prison and hadn't completed required rehabilitation programs. He'd serve at least another 5 years. Simone felt nothing when she heard. No satisfaction, no anger, nothing. He was completely irrelevant to her life now. Bethany had reached out once through social media, asking to meet for closure. Simone had declined. Some people thought closure came from confrontation. Simone knew her closure came from moving forward, not looking back. On the 8th anniversary of that day when Bethany had walked into her home with divorce papers, Simone stood in her bedroom getting ready for work. She looked at herself in the mirror, strong, confident, happy. Nothing like the woman she'd been 8 years ago. Nathan came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. "You okay? I know what day it is." "I'm more than okay. I was just thinking about how different everything is now." "No regrets." "None. If Trevor hadn't betrayed me, I never would have found this path. I wouldn't have started the foundation. I wouldn't have helped thousands of women. I wouldn't have met you." She turned in his arms. "I'm grateful it happened. Not for the pain but for what came after. For who I became because of it." "You're amazing," Nathan said simply. Simone smiled. "I'm human. I just refused to let someone else's terrible choices define my story." That day at the foundation, Simone met with a new client, a woman named Amy who just discovered her husband was hiding assets. Amy was scared, confused, crying. Simone sat across from her and said the same thing she said to every new client. "I know you're afraid. I've been exactly where you are. But I promise you you're going to be okay. We're going to help you protect yourself. And on the other side of this, you're going to be stronger than you ever thought possible." Amy looked up with red-rimmed eyes. "How can you be so sure?" "Because I'm living proof. 8 years ago I was sitting where you are. Today I'm running this foundation, I'm happily remarried, and I'm using my experience to help women like you. Your husband's betrayal doesn't get to be the end of your story, it's just a difficult chapter. You get to write what comes next." Later, after Amy left with her first consultation scheduled, Patricia dropped by the office. "I ran into Trevor's lawyer today," she said casually. "He mentioned Trevor saw the movie about your story. Apparently, he was devastated by how it portrayed him." Simone raised an eyebrow. "It portrayed him accurately. He committed crimes. He faced consequences. What part is he devastated about?" "That the story isn't about him at all. It's about you. About what you built after he tried to destroy you. His crimes are just the setup for your success story. He's a footnote in your journey, not the main character." Simone smiled slowly. "That's exactly right. That's the ultimate victory, isn't it? He wanted to destroy me and take everything. Instead, I barely think about him at all. He's just the cautionary tale in a much bigger, more important story." "The best revenge is indeed a life well lived," Patricia agreed. But Simone shook her head. "It's not even revenge. Revenge implies I'm still thinking about him, still trying to hurt him back. I'm not. I'm just living my best life. If that happens to show him what he lost, that's his problem, not my concern." That night, Simone received an email from the film production company. The movie had been nominated for several awards, including Best Screenplay and Best Actress. The premiere had inspired a documentary series about financial abuse. 3 major universities had added financial literacy courses based on her book's curriculum. Her story had become bigger than she'd ever imagined. It wasn't about Trevor or betrayal anymore. It was about resilience, about transformation, about refusing to be defined by someone else's worst actions. Simone forwarded the email to her team with a note. "This is what we've built together. Every person we help, every system we change, every woman we empower, it all matters. Thank you for being part of this journey." As she prepared for bed that night, Nathan asked, "If you could go back and tell yourself something on that day when Bethany showed up with divorce papers, what would you say?" Simone thought about it. "I'd say, sign those papers with a smile. Everything you're afraid of losing was already gone. But everything you're going to gain, your real strength, your purpose, your true self, is waiting on the other side of this pain. Trust yourself. Trust the process. And know that the woman you become will be grateful for the strength the woman you are right now is showing." "That's beautiful," Nathan said. "It's true. I'm grateful for her, for who I was then. She was smart enough to investigate instead of react. Brave enough to gather evidence when she could have confronted. Strong enough to wait for justice instead of seeking revenge. She made it possible for me to be who I am now." Simone looked around her bedroom in the home she shared with Nathan. A home built on honesty and mutual respect. She thought about the foundation, about the thousands of lives changed. About the books, the speeches, the systemic changes they'd accomplished. This was her ultimate victory. Not destroying Trevor and Bethany, though they'd certainly faced consequences. Not the settlements or the money or the vindication. But this, the life she'd built on her own terms. The work that mattered. The relationships based on truth. The knowledge that she'd taken the worst experience of her life and used it to make the world better. Trevor had tried to take everything from her. Instead, she'd discovered she'd never needed him at all. She'd found her own power, her own purpose, her own path. And it was so much better than anything he could have given her. That was the real happy ending. Not revenge, not punishment, not even justice, though all of those had their place. The real happy ending was building a life so full, so meaningful, so rich with purpose that his betrayal became nothing more than the catalyst that set her free. Simone turned off the light and settled into Nathan's arms, content. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new clients, new opportunities to make a difference. But tonight, she could simply rest in the knowledge that she'd won. Not by destroying him, but by becoming someone better than she'd ever been before. And that truly was the ultimate victory.
As we come to the end of today's story, I want you to sit with us for just a moment. Not just as the story, but as the reflections of something deeper. Because what you just witnessed isn't only about one woman's journey. It's about a truth that echoes far beyond this screen. It's about resilience that refuses to break, even when the world demands silence. It's about strength that isn't always loud, but always present, steady, unshaken, and undeniable. That even in the face of injustice, betrayal, poverty, or pain, there is something within these women that cannot be erased. A fire, a voice, a power that rises, no matter how many times it's pushed down. And maybe as you watch this story unfold, you saw more than just a character. Maybe you saw pieces of real life. Maybe you saw struggle that felt familiar. Maybe you saw courage that reminded you of someone or even yourself. Because these stories, while fictional, are rooted in something very real. They are inspired by lived experiences, by untold stories, by voices that deserve to be heard louder and clearer than ever before. Black women have always carried strength in ways the world often overlooks. They've turned pain into purpose. They've turned silence into resistance. They've turned survival into something powerful, something transformative. And that's why this story exists. Not just to entertain, but to honor. Not just to tell, but to remind. Not just to show struggle, but to celebrate the rise. Every scar you see in these stories represents something survived. Every tear represents something endured. And every victory, no matter how small, represents something deeply, profoundly powerful. So if today's story moved you, if it made you feel something, if it stayed with you even after the screen fades to black, then it has done exactly what it was meant to do. And I want to invite you to be part of this journey because there are so many more stories to tell, so many voices to amplify, so many moments of truth, pain, courage, and triumph that deserves to be seen and heard. If you believe in stories that carry meaning, if you believe in strength that rises against odds, if you believe in truth, in resilience, and in the unstoppable spirit of Black women, then this is your space too. Stay with us, listen, feel, and most importantly, never forget the power of a woman who refuses to be broken. Thank you for being here.